2020 at 3:00 p.m. Roll call, please.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
Director Hoffman is absent.
Okay, thank you. Comments from the public. The public may comment on any item within the district jurisdiction. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes in length. Public comment is now open.
Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
Okay, thank you. Public comment is now closed. We're getting to action items. Public comment will be received. Our first action item is to consider adoption of the November 5th, 2020 committee member meetings. Any comments on the minutes? George, you're on mute.
I said no comments.
Okay. I'll second that, and let's open it up to the public. Do the public have any comments on the minutes?
I see no raised hands.
Okay. Let's have a roll call vote on the
All right. Director Riley
Aye.
and Director Edwards.
Aye.
A motion to approve minutes is adopted unanimously.
Thank you. General Manager, action item number 2.
Yeah, we're going to let Stephanie Locke cover this one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this item is one that comes up every 3 years when we end a general rate case for CalAM's budget. And the 18 to 20 GRC ends December 31st. The decision on the next 3-year general rate case that was filed in July of 2019 is not anticipated until mid-2021. So rather than shutting down the rebate program and reducing our current momentum, the staff is requesting that the board authorize advance funding to continue the program until the GRC is approved and funds are available. The pending GRC has $1.1 million in rebate funding for the Monterey Peninsula for the next 3 years. So between January 1st of 2021 and when the GRC is approved with funding for the rebate program, CalAM will not be collecting the conservation surcharge that funds the rebate program, so we aren't getting reimbursed. But they have agreed at this point to reimburse us once the funding has been approved. And a change to your staff report is that they will pay rebates up to a maximum of $200,000 once they have the approval. So staff is requesting that the Water Demand Committee recommend that the board approve interim funding of up to $200,000 for the rebate program that would be taken out of the district's general reserve fund and then reimbursed by CalAM once they've collected funds to reimburse us.
And Stephanie, if I could just add to that, the conference with the ALJ this morning indicates that the current schedule for the proposed decision in the general rate case will be in September of 2022.
Yeah.
September, not mid.
Not mid. Well, and I do have to say, I talked to Rich Svinlin this morning, and I think what we're looking at is hoping that we might get some kind of a decision sooner than that. If we ended up going further and we get to our next fiscal year, we'll have to talk about whether we need additional funding and what we'd be looking at as far as the amount at that point.
Okay, George, go ahead. You're on mute. You're on mute. George, you're on mute.
Sorry. Dave Laredo, did you say 2022 in September or?
If I did, it's 2021. September of 2021 is when the proposed decision is going to be, is on schedule to be announced by the commission.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify the year. Thank you.
And that's assuming there's evidentiary hearings, which apparently we're the only participant requesting that.
No, that's even,
Not the case?
that's even without the evidentiary hearing.
Wow.
Okay, Stephanie, I see on the staff note, you got 185,000 and you just asked for, I think, 200.
Yes, exactly. That was after my discussion with Cal-Am this morning.
Oh, okay, so you're going to change the staff note to meet what
It has
said?
been changed for the administrative committee.
Okay, thank you. Director Rowley, any more questions?
No, after public comment, we can move this forward.
Okay, Arlene, could we please open it up for public comment? Thank you.
If you have any comments, please use the raised hand icon or press *3 on your phone. I see no raised hands, Chair Edwards.
Thank you, Arlene. Any other comments, Director Rowley?
No, I move approval
Okay, I'll
of
second.
the 200,000 as noted.
Of 200,000, right. Roll call vote.
All right. Director Riley
Aye.
and Director Edwards.
Aye.
Approved 2-0.
Thank you, 2-0. Next item, General Manager.
If you put up the graphic,
Yes.
and sorry to be repetitive from this morning's Policy Advisory Committee meeting, but for those of you who were on that call, you're going to hear it again. So this is the timeline as originally envisioned and then corrected for current events. So right there in the smack in the middle was Enlist Support of State Housing Department, originally slated for August. We began that process late, mostly because the housing legislative people said there's been so much change over at Housing and Community Development that there may be a better approach to get in through the governor's office and some other advice that we had through JEA and Associates, our Sacramento lobbyist. We met on November 19th with the primary consultant to the Senate Housing Committee and Senator Nancy Skinner's aide for general housing issues. And we wanted to accomplish two things there. We wanted to get a reference to the person in Housing and Community Development who would most likely have some sway, which they were really unable to help us with. They did identify the legislative liaison who has helped them and also works with the governor's office. So that will be useful. But since that time, I've met with, or I've gotten a reference from Monterey Bay Economic Partnership on who has been briefed on this issue by them. And I will reach out to that person before this week is out. That meeting also did not get support, which we had hoped to, or a commitment from the author's staff, so Skinner's office. And they basically sent us back to Legislative Advocacy 101, which we, in our own minds, already knew, which is get your current senator, which is John Laird, and Assembly member Mark Stone, to co-author a letter of support and then try to get others to sign on. So we've changed our strategy. We're going to go ahead and draft an application to the State Water Board, send that draft application around to our potential supporters, asking, and with a form of a letter of support, ask them to craft their own letters in support, give them the timeline for our submittal so that they're ready to go, so that their letters of support will come in roughly the same time, within a day or two of our application to the state. So we suspect we'll have the application to the state ready to go hopefully next week, and then support letters and so forth. It would actually then go to the state, right before the Christmas holidays. And so we would not foresee any action until, or any communication on it, the discussions. So the top right box here that was originally hoped for September, October will likely be December, January at this point. And that's where we stand. We feel confident that we will have a hearing. The attorney for the State Water Board has asked, hey, when are you going to submit an application for the 75 acre feet? So, they've been on top of this as well. So stay tuned, and we'll keep all the jurisdictions informed as we move forward.
Okay, Director Riley, any questions?
Yes, Dave, at this morning's meeting, there was some reference to a couple of community agencies, but I didn't hear a reference to all the cities that could join in and support this. Is that in your plan as well?
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. And for example, we had, I think, Kim Cole and Hans Usler from Monterey on our call on the 19th. I think city managers' expectations for that call were slightly different than what our expectations were for that call, which may have led to some confusion with the with Skinner staffer. But nevertheless, yeah, we will have we'll reach out to every one of the cities, looking for their support as well, with the example letter of support. And then we have Land Watch and some of the others that you heard this morning who will also reach out to.
Okay. Just one comment to the general manager. Good job this morning explaining that to Rudy Fisher. I think we need to keep spelling it out to him, that the district itself is there to support the cities that's asking for this water. So
yeah, and interestingly too, Chairman Edwards, Mayor Peak also made some statements where they did not feel they got a fair shake as the city of Pacific Grove, and they need enough water to meet their RHNA goals. And I think there was some misunderstanding there as well, because this was never intended to meet a jurisdiction's total RHNA number. It's a stopgap to let them make some progress in the next 30 to 36 months while we're waiting on a permanent water supply. And those two are completely different. And one of the reasons Pacific Grove seemed unhappy was they put in a request for almost all the water they needed for the next decade. And that's, not the intent. So.
And I remember you explaining that and making phone calls after that meeting.
Yeah.
So, okay. No other further question from the committee. Arlene, could you open it up to the public for comment?
Andy Flower, please present your comment.
Thank you, Arlene. My name is Andy Flower, Principal Planner at the City of Monterey. And the City of Monterey just wants to reiterate our gratitude for the district's leadership and solidarity in our intention to construct affordable housing in the near future. And we couldn't dream big about that right now without your support. So thank you very much.
I see no other raised hands.
Thank you, Arlene. That matter is closed. JM, what's the next item?
Yeah, the next item is an update on any action to be taken regarding the reduction in diversion limits instituted by the State Water Resources Control Board. Also was discussed this morning at the Policy Advisory Committee meeting. And the conclusion is that we will notify the jurisdictions and the press, basically through a press release, that we do not expect any actions will be required to be taken by the district to invoke rationing or penalty rates, or what we call conservation rates, or any actions in the current water year based on this reduction in the effective diversion limit. And then we will also bring a letter to the state board on the district's December 14th board meeting, basically chronicling our view that none of the applicants, including the district, were at fault, as may have been mythologized in a letter from Cal-Am to the state board in October, and also re-encourage them that there are penalties on the water provider versus penalties on the community, and the importance of the community acting through the other applicants that should also be kept a little better in the loop as to what the actions to be taken and effects of those actions will be. So we'll have a draft letter available for the board to review at the December meeting.
Thank you. Go ahead, Director Rowley.
Dave, there was well, let me just back up. You had some data on the water supply options that can kind of cover the ramp down. I assume that's available on the material. I didn't know whether you were going to present that today. But the other question I had was, there's an angle on this that still has some question in my mind. If there is a penalty, and if Cal-Am is considered guilty or whatever, at fault, or whatever the ruling is, they have the right to pass that on to the customer, I think. Is is there a way we can pose that option somehow? Because the ratepayers had nothing to do with any of this, and so I hope they don't get penalized.
Yeah, it's interesting because the company proposed a balancing account for any penalties from the state board over unauthorized diversions, and we opposed that. It might have been a rate case ago, and the Division of Water and Audits came back and said, no, we're going to allow it. You can oppose it when and if it actually has money flowing into it and wants to be closed out and put into rates, which is a much harder process for us to pay attention to. So that would be the time where, well, the two steps would happen. One would be there would be actual penalties and the company would pay them, and they'd roll what they paid into this balancing account. And then at the next rate setting opportunity, they'd be rolling money out of that balancing account and putting it into rates. And so that's where we would have to oppose it.
Just so I kind of understand a little bit, there's a sequence of events that would have to take place, and probably over the next rate case period.
Yeah, and Dave, maybe you can bail me out on this one. How frequently do they roll out those balancing accounts into rates? Is it the GRC?
What's allowed in the GRC. So it would be at the time that they would be doing it as the advice letter, and we'd have to protest the advice letter. Then they would hear that. So it is, and unfortunately, the time period to protest an advice letter is pretty short. And you have to be right on top of that in terms of taking a look at that. But we don't have to wait till the next GRC, because technically it already was allowed by GRC via the advice letter process.
Yeah. And that chart that we looked at this morning's meeting is already being misused by MCAR in a distribution they've done to the mayors. They said the district's plan, and all that chart is a snapshot in time of if the company's down to their legal limit on the river and down to their legal limit on the Seaside Basin and the other sources of water available relative to pumping, how close are we to being compliant with the CDO? And this letter that MCAR is distributing says, there's no consideration given to drought. There's no consideration to the rainfall dependent, basically ASR drought proofness. There's no water for housing. There's not, and it wasn't intended to be that. You have to add, in our current position, Pure Water Monterey expansion on top of that static chart. And that's where all your water comes from for growth and businesses and so forth. So, that chart, while helpful and meaningful, it can get abused. I think people are taking it to say, oh, there's no problem. And the district's position is we can get by for years because we're already there. And that's, that is not our position. Our position is we still need a permanent water supply. But anyway.
Well, Dave, I thought you were very clear at this morning's meeting that this is a snapshot. This is a view of the next 30 months.
Right.
And not a view beyond that. And it's just up to the timing for dealing with the CDO and the State Water Board.
Yeah, and I think it's well understood that, it's 24 to 36 months worth of, if everything goes right, we're in a position where there will be no penalties and no inability to meet the effective diversion limit. But it does rely on some spot water that may not be there in every year. But we're just trying to get by until there's a permanent replacement supply. And I guess, that's been misconstrued to mean, oh, we can get by for a decade or we can get by for years and we don't need a water supply. That's not the case.
And Dave, I hope you re-explain that again at our December 14th meeting. To really get, because it's out there to all the mayors.
Yeah.
And we just need to keep it out and come up with something how to get it out to the public a little bit better.
Yeah, and I did send a short email to the government affairs director for MCAR, claiming or stating that he kind of omitted something, which then leads to a bunch of false claims. So
I appreciate that. George, you have something?
One last question, Dave. I saw a letter from MCAR, but it referenced an attachment, which I haven't seen the attachment. Is the attachment your chart of data?
Yeah, so the attachment is basically that chart of the snapshot in time. And because the in lieu recharge for Seaside Basin, let's say, for example, 700 acre feet a year, doesn't happen until you have your new permanent replacement supply. So either desal or Pure Water Monterey expansion. So Seaside Basin is shown as 1474 because that's kind of the last ramp down that is available until they start that in lieu recharge program. Well, so he takes our numbers, our plan, and he says, well, you failed to include the in lieu recharge. So that number should be 700 less. And he said, you've included ASR and that may not be available in a drought. So you put it to 0 in the drought column. So he added 2 more columns, the actual, in his mind, the available supplies, and then what's available during a drought. And so, he just kind of glossed over the fact that it was a snapshot as to, where are we going to be October 1 of 2021 and December 31 of 2021. Not that it's that it was, anyway. Yeah. So you added a couple columns and said, here's the real story. And so we're mixing our stories now at this point.
Okay.
I can send you that attachment, Director Riley, after this meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Arlene, could we please open it up to the public for any comments on this item?
Yes. Andy Flower, I see your hand is up, but that may be from the last comment you made. All right, thank you, Andy. Chair Edwards, I see no other raised hands.
Thank you. Director Riley, you got something?
It's kind of not on the agenda, but it's not a substantive issue either. How often does the TAC and the PAC, what's their kind of schedule for meetings? How frequently?
Yeah, so let's start with the TAC because that's a more frequent situation. Whenever we have anything that's going to affect local planning, local building, an ordinance change or policy change, we'll pull them in so that basically so that the building and planning departments know what's coming. So that, I don't know, Stephanie, you run that committee. What is that? At least once a year, but often, a couple, 3 times a year. But it's on an as needed basis. Stephanie, do you have any comment on that one?
No, I agree with you that it's just as needed. Sometimes it can be 4 times a year. Sometimes it's a couple times a year.
Yeah. And then the policy advisory committee kind of went dormant when the mayors formed their authority because, there's plenty of opportunity for them to all talk water issues. We did the one joint meeting between our board and the mayor's authority board, which was useful. And I think that was going to be the model going forward. But once that authority disbanded, and I think Director Edwards is right here, if they're not communicating or in the same room talking about the same water issues. And so, for example, Paul Sciutto and I would go to these meetings and do a presentation, a couple times a year. So I foresee that the PAC will probably meet a little more often than, so prior to the formation of the authority, it would meet maybe once a year if there was something big. We certainly met when we were doing our water supply charge planning to let them know that it was coming and what the reason was. But, now we've met twice in a month and a half. And I think things like
Allocations.
Allocations, so let's say we finally get a water supply project approved. That's when we start the allocation process to make sure everybody has a jurisdictional allocation to put back out there. So that'll require the PAC and the TAC, frankly, jointly. And then the TAC will end up getting assigned to do the dirty work for the jurisdiction. So, we'll probably meet more frequently on that. But today's was a very good example of, hey, a letter just came down from the state. The jurisdictions won't be getting together at an authority meeting because the authority is disbanded. So we can't go to the authority meeting and say, well, here's what it means and here's what the impacts are and so forth. So it was smart to have that meeting to say, hey, this letter came out a week and a half ago. Here's what we think it means. And we're not going to come for your restaurant seats and your hotel rooms at this point in time because we don't deem it necessary. And so to get through the year, no harm, no foul. And I think the mayors or Tyler city council members welcomed hearing that. I thought that it was effective discussion. So, and a couple good things came out of that. So, that's going to happen probably. Some of these issues are pretty heated. It'll be a few times a year.
Chair Edwards, I see a raised hand.
Okay. Let's see if they want to speak to us. Give them 3 minutes.
Chair Edwards, hi, it's Mark Kelly. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kelly.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm fine. It's nice to see you. Dave, a question, please. I understand the snapshot in time that you were referring to. I certainly get that. But here's where you could help me out. I believe you went on to say the snapshot in time in terms of getting out of where we are now includes the Pure Water Monterey expansion. And then just a moment later, just a few moments ago, I think you said either Pure Water Monterey expansion or desal. So am I correct? I'm going to make an assumption that you can correct. Would my assumption be correct that in terms of this being a snapshot in time, in terms of where we need to go in the next 30 or 36 months, it's either or? It's either the expansion of Pure Water Monterey or it's desal. Do I have that correct? Thank you.
Chair, should I go ahead and respond?
Oh, yeah, go ahead and answer.
Yeah, you heard it absolutely correctly. So the
Okay.
district's position has shifted to support of Pure Water Monterey expansion versus the desal plant, recognizing that both of them have sufficient water in them for really a good 30 years, but one is cheaper and less environmentally harmful, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I referred to Pure Water Monterey expansion as the incremental permanent replacement supply. But yeah, certainly if the Coastal Commission, which is going to have 180 days probably from Friday, I think they have to deem whether the application is complete tomorrow. So, if they have that hearing and approve the desal plant, then there's no reason to look any further at Pure Water Monterey expansion for the peninsula's purposes. It may come back around as an augment to Marina Coast Water District supply or something else, but yeah, it's an either or.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more comments before we move on to the next item? This is going to come back up at December 14th meeting, right?
Yeah.
So okay, I kept putting that out. Okay, suggested items to be placed on the future agenda. Seaside Basin. What committee will look at seawater intrusion?
Yeah.
They
So
gave that report yesterday. I like to be brought to the full board, but go through the committees if necessary.
Yeah. So I think, it's not on the next week's water supply planning committee meeting, and it should be because, it's a existential threat to a major supply source. I can tell you that they had high TDS or the indicators of salt in one of those Sentinel wells before. And then with the passage of time and precipitation and so forth, it went away. But that tells you that that's where the front is. It's that northwest corner of the Seaside Basin. So I think we have to see what additional work will come out of that water master meeting from yesterday. Then take it through water supply planning to, inform our committee, and then probably just have a summary presentation by John Lear to the full board. We can do that in January or February.
Okay, thank you. So it's not water demand, so water supply, that's George. So just listen to the meeting yesterday was interesting. And I think the full board need to hear some of those comments. I heard that was a good working group yesterday.
Yep.
All right. Any other things that you have, Director Raleigh? Go ahead.
I just want to say that's discussion yesterday was probably the most substantive discussion we've had in the last couple of years. And so it was good timing. Dave, I'm glad you got on, even though you were late. I'm glad you got on because the timing and your information was important.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I had a call at 2, actually on the water for housing issue. John Lear texted me saying that there had been a misstatement that Pure Water Monterey expansion didn't include the in-lieu recharge, the 700 acre feet a year of recharge. And so I texted the person who made that statement during the water master meeting while I was still on my call to Sacramento. And then when I got off, I got onto that meeting, but we hit a point where Paul Bruno basically gave me a chance to correct the record to that committee. But then the last discussion item was one that was really relevant. And so I stuck it out. But yeah, it's, through the wonders of technology now, we can be in 3 places at one time.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. No other questions or anything? I'll say we're adjourned.
All right.
Thank you for a good day there, GM Arlene. Mr. Laredo, bye-bye.